The whole goal of a supply chain is to manage our supplier, our customer's customer, as we have goods and services and money and people flowing through this chain. And so what I'd like to do today in the brief 8 to 10 minutes is just share with you some of, or three challenges that we're seeing out there in the supply chain space, as well as three opportunities in this area. So first of all, supply chains. We're all about balancing the supply and demand to optimize our stakeholders. And wow, COVID-19 has really triggered a massive shift in consumer demand. People are shifting obviously from restaurants to supermarkets, and in some degree from fresh fruit and produce to packaged goods, which is a very interesting phenomena because up until shelter in place, traditional packaged food companies like Cargill and Kellogg's were suffering because consumers were buying more fresh produce. Well, now packaged goods are in high demand, so they're shifting to take care of that. Eggs is another example of a shift in demand. Last year, the egg industry lost money, so farmers reduced the number of hens bearing eggs and cut back on productivity. So now when you go to buy a dozen of eggs, it's $3 a dozen and you're limited to buying one. That price has gone up 229% since January. But from a supply chain perspective, it takes the farmers 4 to 5 months to raise a hen to be an egg-laying age. So this is not a supply chain we can change on a dime. Now moving into testing for the COVID-19 space. Tests are out there. We have better tests and test kits, but now the pipeline has new hurdles. Supplies such as swabs to collect the samples, chemicals to process them are running short. Labs that don't have the equipment or capacity to do enough testing are forced to send them to the big commercial players who are in turn facing bottlenecks. So they're trying to do what they can, and the delay for the results can be as long as 2 weeks. So we need to figure out this supply and demand very quickly, especially in the testing space, as more and more states attempt to decide when to lift restrictive rules and that they have. A second challenge that we're dealing with is supply chains are very complex and internationally dependent, which is, for you alumni out there, why we trekked across the globe to show you other cultures. We are very much internationally dependent, and we're more globally connected than ever before. And this is the greatest test in international cooperation in more than 75 years. And when you think of a chain, a supply chain, it's really a supply network, or more like a spider web, where groups of manufacturing facilities are connected by transportation routes with several storage nodes along the way. But we're seeing through this pandemic, especially in manufacturing space, that relies on labor-intensive processes that are requiring people to work closely together. These have been disrupted because of social distancing requirements. Furthermore, in our global supply chains, specifically to the US, we plan for Chinese New Year, which occurs the end of January. But now that China is slowly tamping into the waters and opening up again, questions are rising as to where the products will go if our stores are closed, our DCs are closed, or what if these products were ordered and now they're no longer needed or wanted, they're out of season. Another interesting phenomena, they're actually calling it modern piracy, is freight forwarders are reporting concerns that shipment of medical supplies and goods that are needed may not get through to their intended destinations as countries are impounding these shipments for their own needs. We've seen India put a total ban on exports of hydroxychloroquine, if I'm saying that correctly, the malaria drug that President Trump has been saying might be a game changer. And third, another issue of pain that's really not getting a lot of space on the front page of our papers is the truckers. And we can even look at the Amazon delivery people lumped in this, but trucking mainly, they're the lifeblood of our supply chains. And they deliver the food and medical equipment and gas. On the good side, traffic, the rate at which they can now move through rush hour has gone from 15 miles an hour to 53 miles an hour. However, on the downside, they're finding rest areas are closed, where they get food. Those locations are closed. A lot of truckers are hauling into COVID-19 hotspots every day with no protective equipment, no testing capabilities or ways to self-quarantine or seek treatment if they do become sick. And furthermore, states are closing down their Department of Motor Vehicles. So now people who might want to step up and be a driver or get their CDL, that opportunity is not there. So that's an issue that needs to be wrestled with to keep our truckers safe and continuing. Now, shifting more into a positive space, there's been several great stories out there and lots of opportunities. We're seeing large and small companies stepping up to the challenge. They're pivoting what they're producing. We've seen 3M producing masks, Apple face shields, Honda, Ford, automotive factories making respirators, distilleries are making hand sanitizers, and even the big chemical companies are stepping up to make hand sanitizers. Secondly, another unique space that's really shining right now is IT. We all know firsthand the power and growth of Zoom. That's how we're connecting today. Whether you know it or not, it's gone from 10 million to over 200 million users by the end of March. This is crazy. People who have traditionally worked from home have touted that they can have more productivity, more performance, profitability. However, a lot of us are having to adjust to working online and learning new technologies. But as we move specifically into the supply chain space, we're seeing supply chain areas, for example, procurement has normally been built on relationships and a lot of face-to-face. However, through IT, we're using chat apps, video call apps to use automation tools to enable requests for proposals, requests for quotes, online auctions, online document approvals. These things are keeping procurement going on in companies. In the transportation space, there's several IT brokers out there, truckstop.com, FreightWaves. They're now offering free subscriptions to their auctions and their sites in order to help truckers find ways to find full loads and valuable rate information and real-time quotes. In the manufacturing space within the supply chain, we're seeing virtual reality being done within the automotive space to keep new designs continuing forward. And finally, the third and most interesting is traditional business silos are really being broken through this, as in order for innovation to occur, and perhaps this might be something that businesses will continue, especially as we come out of this. Dow, who is making the hand sanitizer, they are now doing it globally in Michigan and West Virginia, but also in Belgium and Brazil. But the interesting thing is, in order to make over 1 million bottles that they are anticipating to make, they had to work with many different government paradigms, agencies, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Alcohol and Tobacco, Tax and Trade Bureau, Department of Homeland Security, in order to get the permits and the licensing for the raw material and so forth. If you have 20 minutes or you're out walking in your neighborhood, I encourage you to listen to a great 20-minute podcast. It's on Money Talk, and it talks about a very small respirator company, Ventec, that normally made 150 ventilators a month, and all of a sudden wanted to ramp up to 20,000 ventilators. And so by accessing GM's global supply chain, if you think about the automotive supply chain, an average car has 30,000 individual parts, and it's an environment where the suppliers can be fined up to $50,000 for every minute of delay if they actually stop production on the line. They were able to coordinate with GM. GM worked with a supplier they had in India to take care of a problem there. They put Ventec in touch with a die maker in Grand Rapids, Michigan, who then created a new die, shipped it to a company in Minnesota, who was able to pump out little pistons for their respirators. And they did this all in less than a week. And this normally takes 12 to 16 weeks to get something like this through. So we're seeing great ideas of companies collaborating and breaking down traditional barriers. So I really feel that's a step in the right direction. And new supply chains are being created.